If inflation is easing, why don't things feel any better? What's understanding the disconnect is inflation easing only means that prices are rising slower. They're not actually declining. In fact, they're not really expected to decline. In some ways, this is like the new normal. And then adding to the challenge is literally the fact that adjusted for inflation, wages are actually lower than they were 50 years ago. Now, as always, my point is not to drive fear, but rather recognizing you have to begin to take charge of your own financial destiny. Now, our intention is to, at some point, put together either a video seminar or maybe a live stream masterclass where we can dig deeper into the practical application of these steps. But for the moment, what I do want to do is just kind of begin to put out some tips that will begin the process of transforming your life. And don't wait. The beginning of changing your destiny, grabbing that future freedom starts today. It starts when you begin to take action. And what I'm going to share is based on not just biblical principles, but several decades of wealth management and what we actually saw truly worked and didn't. And before we start, the first is avoiding gimmicks. Now, this seems pretty obvious, right? But some of these can be so compelling, so convincing, that the evidence backing them up can seem so real. I've many times seen personal friends, sophisticated, intelligent people, sucked into them, and they never work in the end. They may for a moment give that appearance of actually accomplishing something, but in the end they always collapse. And we need to understand part of that is not just is it a little deception, but we have to begin to understand what fairy tale faith is. Now, God, the standard is God is always desiring to bless. He's merciful. He's gracious. He wants to do exceedingly abundantly above all we can think or ask. And when the promise is that we can come boldly before His throne of grace, what that literally means is He's actually inclined forward. He's leaning towards us, desiring to bless, to answer our prayer, to meet our needs. That is His standard. That's His position. But we also have to recognize the disconnect here is fairy tale faith is this expectation that God is going to just hand it to us, just drop it into our lap. And the reality is God never gives us anything we aren't prepared, we're not mature enough to manage. There is not a single example in the Bible of God just handing someone a windfall. Now, the exception is, or the better way to understand that is, we see repeatedly when people were faithful to follow God's direction, then the outcome was so often an outsized blessing. But it was always in response to His leading. God never gives winning lottery numbers. That faithfulness is the foundation that literally qualifies us for greater blessing, for greater momentum, that God's desire is we would prove faithful so He could entrust more to us. That is His position. So how do we know if something's a gimmick? Well, again, God doesn't bless gimmicks. There are no shortcuts with God, but there are accelerators. See, the lack of shortcuts isn't a negative. That the accelerators are is when we're faithful and we respond to His leading, He will accelerate you, propel you further than you would have ever gone any other way. And we have to learn how to tap into that. And so the recognition is that God doesn't bless the gimmicks. He doesn't bless the shortcuts. So we want to avoid those. And another is, and I share this from time to time, we need more of God's people who begin to rise up. And let me give you specifically what I mean. What I'm talking about is those who are willing to do what no one else wants. The ones that are looking, whether you work for a company, you see a project or division that's suffering, that it's got a bad reputation, nobody wants to touch it. Whatever that is, what's the thing that nobody wants, that it's failing, where you can step out of the boat and walk on the water of faith and allow God to bring promotion. And let me explain. See, when we step out in these things, we walk on that water of faith, so to speak. We force ourselves to rely on God's leading for innovation, development, to actually transform. We're looking for God to work through us to bring that powerful transformation. It's an amazing step of faith. And in doing so, not only, again, are we now relying on His leading and His direction, but we're demonstrating that faithfulness. And what happens? God brings promotion. And here's the beauty. It doesn't matter if the current organization appreciates you or not. That your gift, the promise is your gift goes before you and brings you before the great. That your gift, you're stepping out, you will bring that appreciation. You will be valued, whether it's by the current organization or the next door that God opens on your behalf. That God always honors that. And we need more, as I started saying, we need more of God's people who step out and rise to the top. That what we see is all through history, God had those heroes of the faith that He raised up to be the ones to bring change and impact in challenging times. Now, the difference is when we look in the Old Testament, it was always an individual. And today, it's not singular, but as many are as willing. And then the final thought for today is I call it the 10% solution. Well, frankly, it's something a friend of mine said, and I thought that's a great way to encapsulate it. And this truly is the foundation, the building block that we have to start with. And the 10% solution is two parts. The first part is obviously giving. It's our generosity. Our generosity both qualifies us, it purifies our motives, and it breaks off, it demolishes the hindrances in our life. Now, I won't go deep into it, but if you're unsure about the power of generosity and tithing, there is in the members area, if you go look under Digging Deeper, the video series, there's a video there, what's the big deal about tithing? And what we do is we break it down, forget whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, what is the practical promises and benefits that God gives us through that? So if you're interested, it's available. But the other 10%, and this is the one where so often, see, both of these steps often require tremendous faith. And the other one is, it's planting the seeds of your future freedom. It's 10% being invested for your future freedom. And I will make a profound, bold statement, which people often disagree with, and that's okay. That you will never be free until you begin to plant those seeds. That greater income will never give you actual freedom. And that sounds counterintuitive. It seems like higher income makes it easier to do these things, but it actually doesn't. How often over the years I've met people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Literally, not kidding. $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year and are completely unable to save and invest anything. Begin now. Remember, faithfulness is what qualifies you for greater blessing. We have to begin to be faithful wherever we are today. Find that way to begin to give God 10%, but also begin to give ourselves 10% by investing in our future, planting those seeds of our future freedom. Those things will produce income for us, giving us that freedom down the road to follow God's direction, not being constrained by financial lack. And in doing so, a couple of thoughts. First off is, remember, the 10% solution is actually just the starting point. That once you really grasp this, what you do is you begin to look for ways to increase that, both giving to God and planting for our future. And bringing it full circle. Remember, too, that building for your own future, avoiding those gimmicks, avoiding those shortcuts of things that seem to offer easy success. And remember that God has accelerators as we prove faithful. But ultimately, don't delay. Don't wait any longer. The sooner you start, the sooner you begin to see the results. You begin to qualify yourself for that future success, future blessing, future prosperity, etc. Don't wait. Start now.